And then it's dealing with personality profiles. Lots of times you're dealing with people of sometimes they're famous and sometimes they're not necessarily famous, but they have an interesting story to them or tell a bigger or can tell doing a personality profile can tell a bigger story of a bigger issue. And part of that is there's a lot when you're talking about a certain personality, be it a celebrity or a common person who's got maybe a job that is extraordinary, or maybe it's not an extraordinary job, but because you're doing their job, it tells a bigger story overall. And some things you should understand about when you're interviewing these people, the process of doing it, what you should be asking, but things that you should be paying attention to when you're doing an in-depth personality profile, because it's going to take a little while to really pay attention and get different angles of story. It's more than just talking to them the one time. Okay, I'm done. But you want to. This is supposed to be a profile, and the only way you can get a profile is talk to not only that person, probably multiple times, but other people within their life from different aspects of our life, not just the superficial, but the things that make these people who they are, and who we become is from a lot of the experiences that we have, the people that we meet, the people that teach us along the way, who have mentored us, who've seen us progress. If you're going to do a personality profile, you got to talk to those people as well, because it gives you a pathway to the person that they are at that given time. We don't just pop out this way. There's many layers to it. There's many experiences. There's many people along the way, and many things that you learn that mold you into who you become. And that's the same with any personality, person out there, famous or not famous. And when you're doing a personality profile, that's the things you have to pay attention to. Um, you have to understand people enjoy reading about lives of other people, especially from if they're a celebrity or just a really interesting person with a real interesting job. That's why we do these stories about them. People want to know about what's going on and what makes these people tick and where do they come up with. Maybe it's something creative that they do, or a storyteller, or a musician, or whatever the case of their profile is. That well, what makes them tick, and people are interested in that because they like some aspect of performance or whatever they are, if they're an athlete or whatever the case is, or a politician or just some person that's a great teacher, or some person that's been a civil servant for so long in a certain job and is quite the personality, does things in a certain way, and could be a person of local prominence that is a mainstay of that area, but they have a real interesting story. People want to know about these people, who they are, what made them good at what they do, or is how they are. And every person does have a story. We have lots of layers to us. And it's being able, when you're focusing on these people, the only way that you can do that is by doing it in lots of different, finding lots of different people for that. First interview, and there's basically a few different stages. First interview, when you're sitting down with this person you're profiling, you want to get kind of a rough sketch of who that person is. All right. Before you go in there, you do your research, basic research on them, as much as you can. So it'll help you form questions about who this person is, and then you want to know, to show that you're prepared, that you know something about this person going in, um, and it'll help you come up with more general topics such as education, background, experiences, general interests, and it basically shows some of the basic stuff that you're first starting off with, and try to very broad, open-ended questions. You don't want to get too intricate in any questions that you ask. Listen, all right, what they're talking about, and they might start talking about certain things, and that's where Watch for Small Moments comes from. And they might talk about experiences that they had in the past, like it might be some celebrity or some athlete and or whatever, and they mention, yeah, I remember growing up, and we always used to go to this, or maybe it's an athlete. No, this coach really showed me the importance of, he's a baseball player, of, hitting the cutoff man, and he really was an integral part of how I approached this, and that when say that say the baseball player, hypothetical baseball player, says this stuff, and see if that person's still around, and then what you're going to do is you're going to talk to them, because sometimes when when people reminisce about things, sometimes they misremember it, and that actually does happen. Like, I know it sounds like a joke, misremember. It just sounds like somebody's lying, like a politician would say that. But sometimes we do. I remember things a little differently, and then when you talk to that other person, they might remember it a little differently. Um, and but also, I mean, it gives you a new angle into that person, so you're trying to listen to what they're saying when they're reminiscing about how this person got to where they are going, or where they are, or whatever the case is. Like I said, there's lots of people along the way, and every time they mention something, or maybe you bring up something like, "Oh, who would you say helped you on your way to where you are? What are some experiences that you've had?" You can, and that will show you, that will bring you to possibly to other people to talk to. So that gives you even more sources, because you're trying to get a complete picture of this person. And part of that is that, and they'll know a good for development of that. And then it can also bring up some new things of things going on now. It's maybe there's something that that say this hypothetical baseball player does now, or teaches people now, or maybe doesn't do very well, and at this time they might be a superstar baseball player, but they're not really good at doing something, and they're known for that. And that coach say, "Oh yeah, well, never really could do it then either. I don't know what that was, and um, I tried real hard." I mean, it's just little things like that. You're really getting into the in-depth layers of this person, because you're bringing in people. You're looking for a couple, at least a few people, at the very least a few people, to get into the different levels of this person to help. So you're showing people how this person developed, and how they've developed into who they've developed. Right? And these are all these things that and these other people that they're mentioning, they're called secondary sources. So you talk to them, then you try and get those other people, if you can, to sit down with them to tell the because when you're doing a profile, it's going to be in depth, and you're going to have a little time to do it. So, and you'll talk to the secondary sources, and that's from the first interview. And then you've got your second interview. When you do that, when you're looking in your secondary sources, you talk to them, and then you're gonna get that other information, just like I said, and then you're gonna talk about what they saw, and then when you're done, if there's any inconsistencies with one story, then with them, you go back to the original, the person that you're talking to again, the main person you're focusing on, the personality profile. Say, yeah, they said it happened this way, and sometimes, oh no, yeah, you're right there, and they might have, and then there might be more to it. You might be able to dig a little deeper in for those details. And this is also, so you can confirm things and deny things, and find some things out uh, when you're talking to this when you're talking to them for the second time. Now, they also mentioned a third interview. You may not get a third interview. Um, and you might have to do what they tell you to do in the third interview and the second interview, and that would be kind of like paying attention to what they're wearing, how they do things, what they're it could be what they're eating or drinking, or what superficial things, well, how they keep their hair, how they dress, because you've been around them a couple of times, and it also gives you physical things to describe within this profile, because you're getting a feel of who this person is, outside of the what you normally see them as. And they've been with you a few times, and so this really kind of gives, and also you can see how they communicate with you, how they deal with others, and that's the things you'll be looking for if you have the opportunity of a third interview for this full profile. And between all those different interviews, talking to your secondary sources, paying attention to what they're wearing, maybe what they're eating, make whatever they have, maybe jewelry they're wearing or anything like that, and there might be stories with that. You're going to really get the inside of who this person is, because people like reading about it. And then it comes to is this big story worth it? So what does that mean? They basically you have to think of what are the things that when you're dealing with a big story. Okay, if it's a big story, there's some questions that you should ask. If I'm going to be telling this big story, is it worth it? Man, lots of times when you're a journalist, sometimes people are, I don't want to go with the big story. I like with my small stories, and I'm kind of happy with that. It could be data related, open records requests. Sometimes it can take up time, and you don't want to miss out on other things. But there's some questions that you should ask for that when you're looking at it. All right. First of all, does it answer a question? All right. Basically, your best investigative pieces and data-related stories, they answer a question. You could talk about crime or salaries, but it doesn't really answer a question. You want to answer questions that will explain something. That's first and foremost. Does it break new ground? Has this never been done before? All stories. It seems like every story has been done, but there's offshoots of other stories that may have never been covered in a certain way. Are you doing something that's original? Are you looking into something that might be related to something that's done before, but not quite in this way? And that brings importance to that story as well. Does it have potential for impact? We want people to care about what we're writing. So it goes back to, how is it impacting your audience? Does it have an impact? Will what you talk about positively impact people because you shined a light on something? Is there something that will change things because you did that? So when you're talking about, is this big story worth it? Is it going to impact in some way because of why you did this? How does it affect people? If people are going to care about it because they're seeing what you're talking about is affecting them, and hopefully in a positive manner, because then they're going to, this person's really looking out for us, and because of their work, these positive things have happened because you told the story, because you dug, because you looked in it, because you're constantly looking for things, because you always have your head on a pivot and always kind of paying attention to what's going on, even in the course of when you're doing your job. And it can be difficult sometimes, but that's part of it. It doesn't have a point. Well, what's the entire point to it? And they say, here's a tip, keep making yourself write down a sentence or two explaining the story. What is the story? What is the news? And if you can't do it in a couple sentences, you need to go back to work. Is this a story? And this is all part of it. Is this thing a story worth writing? And it's not easy being a journalist. Lots of homework, lots of thinking outside the norm, and just not repeating what people are saying and just going through the routine. In this day and age, it's tougher than ever before with dwindling staffs and resources. Even though we've got these monster um, corporations that own just about everything, which probably else doesn't help because you probably have dwindling sources. But I mean, you still, if you're going to be a journalist and not just a minor bird repeating things that people say, just okay, here's your news. A journalist really digs and really looks for the stories and what matters to people. And you might find it difficult, and because it could be just in general, or there might not be a true commitment to it, or people just want you to get done what you want to get done, so they have content. A real journalist digs, and a real journalist cares about getting that story, putting it out, and trying to make the world a little bit better place because you've been there and because you did it. That's what being a journalist is, and I think a lot of people have forgotten that. And it's easy to fall within that because you have a job to do, and when the day's over, it's just easier to forget about it. But good journalists care about the story. Good journalists care about serving the people that they read so they're informed. People have forgotten a lot about that. And that hopefully maybe the things I'm telling you will push you more towards that way. Other things you should understand: no FOI laws, Freedom of Information Act, FOIA laws. Understanding that, especially when you're dealing with government and stuff like that, and policies and stuff, that stuff is usually it's free access, and it has to be specifically written in a certain way, and it's got to be made accessible. And lots of times they don't want you to know about it because a lot of times you're probably doing something wrong, or they just want people to not look too deeply, and it's become easier because of lack of news sources and lack of people really trying, because they're just getting caught up in the everyday. Oh, we got a story. Go deeper, but I mean, it's all out there for you. Freedom of Information Act. Just know the laws of your state and federal, and paying attention to all that. Also, things called sunshine laws when you're dealing with state meetings and records for that. It's all out there. That's the scary part about it. It's not that hard to find. It sometimes it takes a little bit of digging, and a lot of times, especially when dealing with government bureaucracies, they're really good at burying things or not letting people know and advertising that these things are out there, but they are out there, and by law they're supposed to be there. It's just sometimes it's harder to find them than it really should be. But being a good journalist, you should know that this stuff is out there and it needs to be reported on. And sometimes they find out, hey, well, where did this go into effect? And nobody knew about it, but it still has to be publicly put into public record. But sometimes it's buried in ways that, though it's still public, it's kind of hard to navigate. And it's your responsibility as a journalist to know how the laws of a given area, what's allowed, what's not, what is public. A lot of stuff's public. You'd be surprised what is public, but you don't hear about it. And the part of it comes back to that outlets. It could be corporate interests on coverage of some sort. It could be personal bias interests, or not fitting a certain niche or brand. And that's not what journalism is supposed to be about. It's supposed to be about getting the story out there, telling the truth regardless of that. Like I said, it's too much to talk about. There's so many layers to it. People don't want to hear about it. It hurts my head. But if you're going to be journalists, be real journalists, and don't be phony journalists just doing a job for some money and say I'm a journalist even though you're not really doing any real good, and you might be ignoring things that need to be talked about because, well, I like that person. I don't care if you like that person. They're doing something wrong. They need to be held accountable for it, period. It's just the way it is. It's the way it's supposed to be. And I'm sorry to say it. More and more it seems it's gone the other way. And we have a lot of the problems and ignorance in the world that we do have. It's kind of scary. But maybe if you and kind of like push it and start a new way and do the way it's supposed to do, and enough people get a hold of it and start following that, might have a better place. Big three things you should think about. All right. Anything can lead you to a story. Ask why about things you see. All right. Focus on the people. Always be nice. Be nice. Don't be a jerk. Don't be an egomaniac. Because you have to make connections. You have to make sources. Sources are your lifeblood, or you're not going to be a journalist. Not going to get any stories. You're just going to have to get out of your comfort zone. Okay. Don't be afraid to dig. It takes time. All right, when you're being a journalist, all these things, it's a lot of work. Yeah, and there's lots of things you got to work on, from writing and understanding and the sources and the places you need to go. And being a journalist is a lot of work, and a lot of times it's not glorious work. It's you're looked down upon a lot, especially these days. But there's important work to do, and it's important you be a good journalist by being honest, by making sure you're paying attention to your audience and what they need to know, and getting good stories. That's not only informationally, it entertains and has positive impact, and hopefully you make a better world of this place. That's pretty much it. I hope you got something out of that. And just keep working on stuff, and we'll get through this semester. All right?